What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today let's talk about front shock mounting location. Before we get too deep into today's video, I want to let everybody know that the ticket sales have closed on our 22 5.0 DC Elite raffle, giveaway, whatever you prefer to call it, and that I will be announcing the winner at the end of today's video. So make sure you stay tuned if you got tickets to see if you won. Now, transitioning to our topic of the day, we're going to talk about our front shock mounting location. As you guys know, in our tuning series, we've talked heavily about the different roll center tuning adjustments. As of now, I think we've hit just about everything. There might be a couple stragglers, but all the main important stuff is now uploaded online for you guys to check out in our Let's Talk playlist. So to start off kind of a new segment of that tuning series, we're gonna start talking about our shocks. Like I said, specifically the mounting location of the front today. There's lots and lots of things to go over with the shocks, whether it be springs, oils, pistons. Some cars have different shock body sizes, different shock shafts. So it's gonna be important to obviously know what each of those things do, especially because they can get really, really confusing. I know for me personally, shocks are probably one of the most confusing things. So we're gonna break it down into multiple videos, just like we did with the roll center adjustments, and get you guys all of the information as simple and straightforward as possible. So just like usual, we'll go ahead, swap our positions here, get you guys an up close of the front end of my car, and we'll talk about those different tuning adjustments. All right, so now take a look at the front end of my vehicle here. As you can see, I did take off a shock on this side. That way you have a better idea of what hole options you have on the upper and lower. And then I left this shock on just as kind of, well, it's just on there to be on there. You get kind of a little bit of a visual, reminder that a shock goes in that location. But to now jump into our tuning, the first thing I'm gonna go over is just kind of the general idea of what a more inclined or less inclined shock is gonna do. Then we'll get more into what each of the different tuning options will do for you on the upper and lower mounting side of things. So just as a general rule of thumb, the more that you have the shock inclined, it's gonna have a little bit softer initial dampening. It's gonna be more progressive. It's going to be more forgiving. That's the big thing there, is it's gonna be more forgiving. So for those of you that are newer into driving around the track, it'll be a good option to start with. That way you have something that feels a little bit more numbed out, not quite so aggressive. And then it's also going to be better on a high bite track because again, it's going to numb out that steering, and you're not going to necessarily want to use it on a super bumpy track because it's not going to absorb that very well. So in the less inclined area, you're gonna have harder dampening, and it's going to make the car more responsive because it has harder dampening. It's gonna put a little bit more pressure on that tire, and it's going to usually be better suited on a more technical track that's tight because you're going to be able to have more steering on the front end. The front end is going to feel more pointy. Now we've kind of gone over the general idea of everything. Let's go ahead and talk about our tower mounting location. So as you can see in my case, I have 4 options here. All the way inside this hole here is going to be the most inclined, the most laid down. And then of course, this hole here on the outside is going to be the least inclined. So it's going to be the most stood up. So on these outer holes here, the more you stand the shock up, you're going to have a faster steering response, and it's going to be better on the bumps and jumps because the shock is going to be able to, as you hit things head on, soak in those bumps a little bit more. It's also going to help keep the front end up and out of it. So it's going to help on tracks similar to, something like a Silver State or a Dirt Nitro Challenge, for example, tracks that do get pretty bumpy. Now on the inner holes, we are going to lean the shock in. So right here on this very inside, hole 1, you could call it, that is going to be, like I said, easier to drive, and it's going to slow down that steering response. So it's going to be a little bit easier to drive for anybody that's getting newer into the track driving end of things. And it's going to be more suited, again, for those smoother tracks, higher bite tracks, because on something like that, you already have so much grip, you're trying to numb down the steering. Looking now at our lower holes here, we're gonna have 2 options on this particular car. Some cars do have 3 options, but as you go to the outer holes, so this outside hole here, then you're going to, again, increase your stability. It's gonna be easier to drive, have that larger turning radius. And then if you go to this inside hole here, that is going to be your more responsive end of things, faster steering. And again, because the shock is more stood up, it will be better on a bumpier track or on a jumpier track per se. Now, obviously there are different options we have in the sense of, you could have 2 options for each of these holes up here, because you have mounting hole here, and then you have 2 options down here. Then you have that same thing for each of these holes. Now, as you can see, my general running location is going to be hole 2 on the tower and hole 1 on the arm. Now, just as a quick reference, the factory location is going to be hole 3 on the tower and the outside on the arm. And the reason I want to say that is because even though I've moved this inside hole here and I've moved the inside hole here, my shock is going to change its overall location, moving closer to the center point, but the inclination of it is going to be very similar because I moved both of them in unison. So you can almost see it a little bit as a middle ground-ish area. Now, what's gonna happen as you move the shocks just kind of overall closer to the inside, so you do both these movements together, it's going to allow for a little bit more weight transfer to the back under acceleration because the shock is going to feel slightly softer being in that more inboard location. And it's also going to allow a little bit more weight transfer to the front of the vehicle. And just like with that, because you have more weight transfer, that also means that you're going to have a little bit more roll in comparison. But it's kind of, like I said, that middle ground area where you're not making a huge inclination adjustment, you're just keeping the same inclination, but moving it closer to that center point. Now, the opposite happens, of course, if you move both the tower and arm location in unison out. That is going to give it a wider stance, so that is going to give it that more stiff feeling. It's not going to transfer the weight side by side nearly as much, and it's not going to transfer weight front to back nearly as much. So just a little brief snippet to kind of go over before we close out the tuning portion of this video. Now that we have gone over everything, or at least I believe we've gone over everything, if there's anything I missed or anything that you want me to go over more, definitely leave it down in the comments. But now that we've gone over all of the general stuff for our front mounting locations, let's go ahead, swap over to the computer, and we will announce who won our 22 5.0. Okay, so here we are at the computer with a nice wheel of names in front of us. You can see we've got plenties in here. We had 104 total entries for this. And I did have everything entered in, and I already shuffled the names on this side. So now, for the first time ever, I'm gonna press this spin button. I haven't tried this yet, so we're gonna hope that this just works. But within the next 30 seconds, we are gonna know who our winner is. So we're going to click to spin, let it do its thing, see how long it takes. And it is Edward Reynolds is going to be our winner of the 22 5.0 DC. So we will go ahead, get this guy shipped out to you. Congratulations. Alrighty, so that brings us to the conclusion of our tuning video. And of course, congratulations again to Mr. Edward Reynolds. We will get this guy shipped out to you as soon as possible, so that way you can start building your all new kit. So just like I said before we got out of the tuning end of things, if there is anything you guys want me to go over in a little bit more detail, any questions you have, definitely leave those down below. And congratulations again to Mr. Edward. See you guys next week.